Is to begin. Welcome everyone, and first some housekeeping items. Number one, this meeting is being webcast and recorded. We are going to have, I suspect, a pretty significant public comment process. Anybody who wishes to speak on an item presented before the council is welcome to do so at the appropriate time. We've got public comment cards that are available in the back of the room and should be submitted to the SGC staff at the front table. I'll call on individuals to speak following a motion on an action item or following council discussion on information items. Please note that if we receive a large volume of requests for comments, we may limit the speaker's time the speaking time per commenter. We're also urging coalitions to speak that are sharing similar views to please select a representative to speak to represent that comment. Thanks for your patience, and we'll do our best to allow everyone time to speak. I suspect we'll be at a 2 or 3 minute per comment time frame in order to end this meeting as planned. Everybody can see we have a number of members here. I want to take this opportunity to introduce the new member on my right, Gail Goldberg. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're all very happy to have you here, and as one of the public members, I'm probably the most happy to have you here. Now we're bolstering the public membership of this committee. Gail was appointed by Assembly Speaker Tony Atkins last week. She's an urban planner with 20-plus years of effective, positive, long-lasting change, working as a planning director for cities like for the cities of Los Angeles and San Diego. She's an internationally recognized expert in community revitalization with vast experience facilitating coordination between city departments and outside agencies to promote sustainable city growth. Currently, she's executive director of the Urban Land Institute's Los Angeles District Council, a native Californian who earned her degree in urban studies and planning from UC San Diego. Welcome, Gail, and if you'd like to say a few things.
Well, thank you very much. I'm obviously quite honored. Push the button. It's fairly clear that I'm new and that I'm going to be in learning mode today, so I hope that you will bear with me. I'm very honored to be here, and I have followed the work of the Strategic Growth Council for some time and have been very impressed. It appears to me to be sort of a natural extension of the kind of work that I have done for local jurisdictions for a long time, working hard to integrate all of the component parts to really create great communities and neighborhoods. Bob has set a very high bar for the public member, and I will try my best. I will follow you and use you as my example as I move forward. So thank you all very much for having me today.
Well, thanks very much for those nice comments, and I'm available anytime to talk with you about this. It's been, I hope you have as much fun as I've had with it. I think there's great opportunity for all of us here. So let's move on to the approval of minutes. I want to introduce the item. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move approval.
Both the June 3rd and the July 10th meeting minutes.
Exactly.
Thank you, John. Any discussion? So moved. A second? All in favor? Aye. My first motion was approved. That's good. Starting out well. Item number 3, executive report. Mike McCoy.
You hear that all right? Okay. Thank you very much. In keeping with newly established tradition for an abbreviated executive report, I'll just go straight to the headlines. And in your packets, you will find a full report on all of the items that we've been working on over the last 3 months, but I won't go through them line by line this afternoon. First, I'm pleased to introduce our 2 most recent SGC staff members. Sitting to my left is our intergovernmental policy program analyst, Mackenzie Weiser. Mackenzie, welcome to the SGC. I'm sure that she's going to be a tremendous asset to all of us as we better organize our intergovernmental business processes and draw our agencies closer together. And also seated next to her is our executive assistant, Kim Danko. Welcome, Kim. Glad to have you here. Okay. I wanted to call your attention just to a couple of items today. One is that in cooperation with the Department of Finance, in their fall finance letter this year, there is a paragraph referring to the need of departments and agencies to alert us to the documents that they use ordinarily in their ordinary course of business to interpret whether or not an infrastructure item that they're requesting finance for is consistent with California's planning priorities. And we're fairly sure, after talking with many of the business officers throughout the system, that this is a routine activity, and so we're going to be very pleased to publicize the fact that this takes place, and this will also facilitate our ability to understand the 5-year infrastructure plan in the context of California's planning priorities. We are not going to forget Member Fisher's request to consider that definition of the word infrastructure as it occurs in the 5-year infrastructure plan. There's a relatively short list of things that are required relative to all of the infrastructure finance that the state of California offers, both locally and regionally, and through schools and other institutions. We have the assistance of the California Research Bureau, who is examining the 29 places in statute and code where the word infrastructure is used variously. And Temporary Chair Fisher, we will come back with an answer to you on that at a later date. It's a fascinating subject. We've been working with the High-Speed Rail Authority, as you know, to support their pledge to ensure that California high-speed rail is more than a train. It's a transformation. And we're working with high-speed rail, with our senior advisor for community development, Suzanne Haig, to talk to communities that are in or near station stop communities about how they might best take advantage of the tremendous economic opportunity that's presented them by high-speed rail. And I've asked Suzanne to just say a couple words to you about that.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Vice Chair Fisher and council members for the opportunity. And again, welcome Chairperson Goldberg, longtime fan and really thrilled to have you here with us. As Mike mentioned, I wanted to just give a very brief update on my work. I started this position in April under a special partnership between the High-Speed Rail Authority and the Strategic Growth Council. And I think some slides are coming up. In the interest of time, this will be a very brief overview and perhaps with a subsequent more detailed overview to come when we have a slightly less ambitious agenda on our hands. You can flip to the next slide. California High-Speed Rail, of course, has tremendous potential to help advance state sustainability goals. High-speed rail will help advance the state's ability to promote infill development and equity, to protect agricultural and natural lands, to reduce greenhouse gases, and build sustainable regions that support healthy and livable communities. You can flip to the next slide. And this is really in keeping with, of course, the missions of really each of your respective agencies, as well as the mission of this council at large. High-speed rail will help achieve these goals, of course, in several ways, catalyzing economic development, which will in turn feed the catalyst for infill development around stations, as well as enabling smarter land use patterns, both locally throughout the station areas and throughout the high-speed rail corridor. And of course, these are sort of multiple reinforcing outcomes in that better infill development helps to reinforce broader local and regional land use patterns and vice versa. Economic development likewise can be channeled to help support these goals, and these are really goals where the state's planning priorities and other environmental and sustainability goals overlap with regional priorities to advance infill development, to help revitalize downtown cores where high-speed rail is slated to go, and to help revitalize economically distressed communities really throughout the state. So you can flip to the next one. So what I have been doing to help reinforce all of these goals is a couple of things. First of all, part of my charge is to work directly with local and regional stakeholders, really throughout California, but with a focus on the high-speed rail corridor communities, to advance some technical assistance projects and initiatives in a select few communities. So what this looks like is everything from helping the local community make sure that their local policies and strategies and programs are in alignment, again, with these goals of both state and local sustainability and land use efforts. In Fresno, for instance, the picture at the top of the screen represents some of the infill development challenges that the city of Fresno faces, even as they have pledged to provide special resources and a special focus toward infill development in and around the high-speed rail station area. And this is, of course, one side of the two-sided coin of the other image that you see there, which is the regional land use landscape, which is, of course, the agricultural heart of the state and also a place that is fairly threatened by urbanization, which is often really suburbanization and outgrowth, which takes away from those infill areas. So part of this local and regional technical assistance is, of course, directly benefiting the communities. It's also intended and indeed is informing state level work and conversations with many of your respective agencies about how state resources can help to reinforce these local goals, and really what are we learning when we dig into the weeds at the local level that can help reinforce how we better coordinate amongst our state agencies, what resources are available, and what the state's role is with respect to supporting infill development and smarter land use around the high-speed rail corridor. And that includes working with the California High-Speed Rail Agency itself to help figure out sort of what high-speed rail's role is with respect to all of these things, in addition to building a track and building trains, which, as you know, is no small feat in and of itself. And they've been terrific partners to work with and really advancing a lot of exciting strategies there. And then finally, you know, we can't do this by ourselves with local communities, with the best alignment with state resources. There's still a lot of gaps to be filled and a lot of resources and capacity that other partners can, of course, bring to the table. So part of my work is about building partnerships with the federal government, with local entities, with nonprofits, both nonprofit kind of development-oriented communities as well as nonprofit policy organizations to help provide everything from kind of technical assistance at the local level to policy guidance and some research assistance as well. So several exciting developments on that front, some commitments from partners to really help advance our work and add resources and kind of fuel to the fire to push this work forward. And I'm going to stop there in the interest of time, but look forward to keeping you updated as this work progresses. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks very much. Mike?
Thanks, Suzanne. I just wanted to make sure that you are kept abreast of the fact that your council is working with high-speed rail on these important initiatives. And when that concludes my report, if you have any questions, glad to answer them now, or if upon carefully reading every word of the executive report, you run across something you'd like to talk about, let me know.
Any questions? Okay, thanks. Item 4, this is the time when council members speak to their other council members and let them know just general communications that you all feel is important to go across agency. Secretary Laird.
I just wanted to thank some of the colleagues here, but to acknowledge for everybody on the issue of water, because Secretary Rodriguez and Secretary Ross and I in January issued the California Water Action Plan, and there was at least one highly placed legislative assistant whose comment was, there's no meat on these bones. And in the subsequent 9 months, there's an amazing amount of meat that has been added because the drought package that the legislature approved put $470 million of integrated regional planning dollars out the door, and we made the first round of grants 10 days ago, or announced them. And then the operations plan between the state and federal agencies for operating the water system in the drought really showed how you could do operational efficiency without the need for legislation. And then the water bond filled in conservation, storage, recycling, more integrated watershed money, wetlands restoration. Of the 10 big things that were in the Water Action Plan, it addressed a majority of them with steps to take. And then the legislature, with tremendous support from some of the various undersecretaries here, especially Matt's, adopted the first groundwater management structure essentially in the history of the state, in a desperate attempt to have us catch up with Texas. And so if you look at what's happened in this year, it's phenomenal, and it's really at the heart of what this group does. And the one last thing I'd say about that is that I've been all over the state in the last few weeks, and many people are already spending the money in the water bond. And I want to caution you, we are all here in the state dime, so we cannot in any way get near campaigning. So I just want to say the water bond hasn't passed yet, and you should all educate yourselves and vote your conscience in November, because before people rush to spend it, it does have to pass. So I just, and it was, all this was a real team effort between agencies to make this all happen, and I think it's phenomenal. I never dreamed we would be as far as we were when we put that report out in January.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, Secretary Caballero.
Thank you very much, Chair. Couple of good news, or good news pieces. The $600 million veterans bond that passed in June. There is a joint. It is a joint project with Veterans Affairs and Housing and Community Development. And the first round of $75 million, the draft guidelines are out. The good news about that is 50% will be projects for extremely low-income veterans, and will include supportive services, mental health, drug and alcohol, and physical therapy type programs. The grants will be made in late spring or early summer, which is really good. It's moving expeditiously. Also, we have a new NOFA of $40 million. It is the remainder of Prop C funding, which is infill and infrastructure grants. All small amounts, but they make a tremendous difference in our community. Also, we'll have a NOFA out within 10 days for $90 million for multiple family affordable housing. And then the Keep Your Home California, which has been tremendously successful here in the state. It's a foreclosure prevention program to help those individuals that are upside down or at risk of losing their home. Nearly 27,000 families have been assisted today, $800 million committed. So significant work being done in regards to affordable housing.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, let's move on to items number 5, action item. What we're being asked to do here is to adopt an SGC resolution that supports an integrated regional planning initiative that will be the link development and conservation planning in California. Let me introduce Denny Grossman, who is the SGC's Senior Environmental Science and Policy Advisor, to speak to this item.
Thank you, Chairman Fisher and the Council. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to bring up what I feel is a very important resolution and initiative, and a very timely one. So I appreciate the opportunity to squeeze it in to a busy session. I was brought on by the Strategic Growth Council around 6 months ago to help advance a program called Regional Advanced Mitigation Planning. And what I'm presenting here is, to me, a very logical next step of what needs to happen in order to really implement this program. Let me see if I can figure this out. Good. So there's a number of components of SB 732 and the strategic plan that points towards the Strategic Growth Council taking on this initiative relative to improving natural resource protection, encouraging sustainable land use planning, recommending policies and investment strategies that encourage the development of sustainable communities, particularly those that protect the environment, improving the protection of natural resources and agricultural lands, advancing state planning priorities, which includes the promotion of efficient development patterns and the protection of environmental agricultural resources, and specifically a recent action item to provide direction and leadership for regional advanced mitigation planning and statewide advanced mitigation initiative at the regional and project levels. When I came in 6 months ago, the scope of what I was looking was at regional advanced mitigation planning. The main purpose for regional advanced mitigation planning was to increase the efficiency and timeliness of the acceptance of priority development projects across the state through the connection of them with the protection of important resources. That there was too many hurdles to get through relative to implementing projects that were basically taking way too much time, way too much money, and resulting in not that good of conservation practice. In reviewing ramp processes and the objectives of different agencies over these last 6 months, it's really clarified that what we need to have in place in order for ramp to proceed efficiently is that we need to integrate development planning objectives with conservation planning objectives at a regional scale, which arose to this resolution. So in truth, what we need to have on a regional basis is a very clear sense of what are our regional conservation priorities. If we don't know what they are, there's no way that we really are going to get around to protecting them. At the same time, we need to be looking at the aggregation of different development projects, and so we can understand what the potential cumulative impact is of different projects that we feel are important. And then we can put those together and actually come up with an intelligent way to say, here's the way to move the development projects forward. At the same time, we can address the identified regional conservation priorities. So that is really the heart of what's being put forth as a concept of integrated regional planning. What the products of integrated regional planning really allow us to do in one step more detail is to have the information that's required to be able to site projects intelligently in the first place, so they avoid impacts and they minimize impacts, and to really identify what are the unavoidable impacts from priority development projects and how can we use the mitigation resources from those to protect recognized important places. There's two components of that. One is we have a lot of state lands, we have a lot of federal lands that we've already acquired, and if we manage them better or we manage them differently, we can actually increase our ability to protect the priorities. And in other cases, we need to strategically acquire new lands, and that is where advanced mitigation comes in to be able to address the regional conservation needs at the same time allowing development projects to go forward. So the resolution being put in front of the council is to signify intent that we need to advance this integrated process for planning. The Strategic Growth Council will coordinate state agencies for the development and implementation of an integrated regional planning approach to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of regional development and natural resource conservation for the state of California. This resolution will demonstrate the intent of the administration to increase the efficiency of implementation of these projects with the protection of regional conservation priorities. And in particular, it will help facilitate our ability to align key agencies in organizations that have a responsibility both on the development side and the conservation side to align their activities to achieve these integrated goals. One opportunity that I just want to close with that we have right now is that the California Biodiversity Council is now reviewing a proposal that we're developing for them. There's already a significant number of federal, state, and local governments on that council. Secretary Laird is co-chair of that also. And we are hoping that they will agree to this resolution, well, where they will take a significant role in terms of aligning all these agencies to help with the regional conservation component of this. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Comments by council members?
I'd like to add to what Denny said, and I know we have a new member, and so maybe I can try to very briefly step through this a little, because the Regional Advanced Mitigation Project, or RAMP, was embarked on a pilot basis for 5 counties in the Sacramento Valley. And the idea was that there are mitigations that come with government investment in projects, and they're usually just right there on site or nearby. And if you identify regional needs, it's a way to redirect and deal with money that is in the area on mitigations and address the regional needs. Before Denny came, there was a little bit of a roadblock, and this is my view. I can speak for at least one of the 2 major agencies, but the major amounts of money were coming from the Department of Water Resources and Caltrans. And there wasn't any strong leadership, and so people were finding it hard to get out of their comfort zone in their individual agency and individual agencies' needs rather than look at the regional. So Denny was brought in to help with that, in addition to the fact that high-speed rail, and we heard the earlier report, is going to provide some significant resources in some places. And how do we get this ready to not just break the logjam for the one ramp we have, but try to be ready to expand it across the state? And what I think this resolution does is he's moved very fast in 6 months and very well. And it allows him, rather than looking in, or his partners or whoever's working with him, to looking out at where there are other agencies or other regional priorities or other conservation plans that have been done, and try to align them. And so I think this is a great resolution because it puts the weight of the Strategic Growth Council in the state behind that effort. But at the same time, he mentioned the Biodiversity Council, which I chair with the California Director of the Bureau of Land Management. And the difference between what we've been doing and moving to that is that brings in local and federal agencies. So we can go past just the state agencies and try to align on a much larger basis. So I think this is a good effort, and this allows us to move forward in a very good way that aligns with other people. So for at least the purposes of discussion, I would move the resolution.
Other comments, please? Yes, Secretary Caballero.
Well, John, I appreciate your comments because the concern I had, and actually had a number of questions, is the first question was, are we only talking about state projects in regards to the way that the resolution is written? Because my concern is that land use is local, and it's the local governments that decide land use in all of the growth that they're anticipating. And so that my concern was, is this process in lieu of CEQA? Is it on top of CEQA? How does it interconnect with CEQA? And I think, John, you gave a good example of it working with local government, and that's my biggest concern, because there's no local government representative that's part of the work that's going on. And the resolution doesn't say state projects and we'll work with local government. So I just want to be clear that exactly what are we talking about? How far are we going to go? And I don't want us to put ourselves in a position where the state is coming in and saying, we've decided you've got lots of natural resources, and guess what? We're not going to let you grow anymore because we've decided that the mitigation will be too much. So
I think we're only going to be doing that in the Salinas area.
yeah, well, that's what I figured exactly. That was exactly the point. But anyway.
Dane, could I, just for a second, because when he had a map up there of a regional plan, it was a regional plan that was put together by local governments for their conservation in the region. So that when you get to align with that, you're aligning with a local government effort.
And I think that's what's important, because it wasn't clear to me as I read the information, and I in theory I really like the work that you're doing. But the practicality of it is you really do have to start from a position where you've understood where the local governments are coming from in terms of their own planning, and hopefully can influence it by bringing in resources that might not otherwise be available. So that, as long as that's understood, and I would prefer having something in here that kind of calls out the local government concern, but we hate to wordsmith at the dais, and so I'm not going to suggest that we do that, but.
Right. Well, let me just assure you that that is the intent.
Good.
And that the expectation is actually providing more resources for the local governments to become involved in identifying their priorities and in also understanding the broader context of priorities so they can incorporate that as they see fit in their local planning processes.
Yes.
Denny, is this similar to a program that we had in San Diego? I remember working on the multiple species conservation program. That was something I spent a lot of time on. Is that a similar?
It is very similar to that. Part of what we're doing is just embarking in the process to identify the standards that we want to be implementing. A lot of the processes like that had a couple target species that they were working with. We may have a broader suite of species and habitat and ecosystem services that we're looking at, particularly in light of changes like climate change, to be able to identify the best possible suite of scenarios to do the protection, but very much like that.
Other comments from council members? Can I get a motion?
I'll redo the motion.
Okay. We've got one public comment from Liz O'Donoghue from the Nature Conservancy.
You should see if you have a second.
Got one? Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Liz O'Donoghue with the Nature Conservancy, and might not be a surprise to you that I fully support this resolution. This is years in the making, and I really want to commend Secretary Laird, Denny, Mike, Allison for really moving forward. Also, the Transportation Agency as well. There's plenty of years of research. That's national research that shows that this is the state of the art. And actually, the Federal Highways Administration really launched this initiative in 2006 when they talked about ecological, which was about developing infrastructure agencies from an ecosystem perspective that delivers both conservation of natural lands and working lands, but also better project delivery. And so, as Secretary Laird said, we've had some fits and starts here in California, in part because it's been so difficult with the massive, importance of biodiversity in the state, the suite of species, as well as with the very large number of projects. And so this is really where we need to go. I want to address Secretary Caballero's comment. Where this has been successful is at the local government. So here you are. The San Diego program is a natural communities conservation plan. It's really the gold standard. But San Diego and Orange County and others have really pioneered how to do this. And it's contemplated to have this really touch ground at the local level by providing kind of the framework and the standards and the expectations of what makes this really work. So fully supportive of it, really look forward to working with all of you and staff on helping make this reality. So thank you very much.
Thanks. No further public comments. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Okay. The resolution passes. Thank you. Item number 6, an action item that we adopt staff recommendations to encumber $560,000 of Prop 84 planning and monitoring funds for priority data, information sharing, and outreach projects. Allison, Joe, please.
Thank you. So this item looks at our previous suite of grantees associated with Proposition 84, primarily our Sustainable Communities Planning Grant and Incentives Program. What we have done in the past is we have approximately $560,000 available in this particular planning and monitoring fund account to directly inform and support our grantees. So now that we actually have 3 rounds of grantees and successfully underway, we are hoping to provide some more direct resources to those grantees as a condition of the Proposition 84 water bond money. Again, some of the purpose and background of this funding was that the council was founded on the core idea that we would provide, fund, distribute data and information to our local governments and regional agencies. We hope that this data and information essentially assists in the direct development and implementation of the sustainable communities. When the Prop 84 funds were first received, the council at the time allocated $4.4 million in water bond funding for planning and monitoring projects that support the efforts of the grantees and essentially to help design and implement. This includes, you may be familiar with most of our previous projects that support this. The data projects, including parcel data, healthy community indicators, vegetation mapping, as well as protected lands, as well as some of the work that we've done in terms of our research around infill finance, the Sustainable Community Strategies self-assessment report, among other things that we really hope to influence and inform our grantees. As I mentioned, now that we have actual grantees lined up, we're looking to really encumber the remaining $560,000 for 6 projects as outlined. Again, this work plan will advance sustainability efforts, deliver immediate and longer-term regional and local data, deliver immediate and longer-term regional and local data and information needs, enhance the quality and outcome of the grant projects, and then support the efforts of the grantees to implement these strategies and plans. We're looking at, again, the work plan. What I'm asking from, what staff are requesting from the council is the adoption of the work plan itself. We're bringing forward 6 concepts. We would like the council's permission to go ahead and develop these concepts for a not less than amount, or not more than amount, and then essentially allow staff to develop a scope and structure for these projects, and we would come back to you over the course of the year to be able to give you updates on where this is going. If there were any changes to the scope or dollar amounts, we would come back to the council for your respective approval. The 3 areas that we're looking at are really, again, to support the implementation of these projects, really looking at plan implementation. We fund plans. That's exciting. It's new. It's something that needs to happen. At the end of the day, we want these plans to be implemented, actually built. We hope to develop basically a pipeline that looks at the planning money that we're granting to locals, and then ultimately implementation of those projects. We have seen firsthand how things like and actually in the incorporation of our Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program, how important it is to acknowledge and provide resources to our locals on greenhouse gas emissions quantification. That's something that we're working really closely with the Air Resources Board on. However, we also think that our grantees could and should develop some additional resources to support their efforts and to support their plans and implementation. So we're requesting not more than $150,000 to provide technical assistance for that GHG quantification effort. We're also looking at, as locals are developing their plans, some of the scenarios that come about through that plan development, looking at the effects of more compact development versus more sprawl development, and what that really means to the local government and their fiscal situation. How much revenue do they take in for a more compact development, considering the density in relation to the services that would need to be provided by that local government. We feel like there's an opportunity to really bring some of these issues forward, have a conversation about them, and then use this kind of impact analysis as examples for other communities, other grantees. We're also hoping to provide some information support, technology support. We started out with the planning and monitoring money talking a lot about data, parcel data, really high level stuff. What we're looking at now is as these projects and as our grantees are actually starting to develop their plans, they're really now looking at, okay, we need a common platform to share this data. We need to be able to, within our stakeholder groups, have a conversation to discuss it. And what we're hoping to do is provide a foundational support for that data effort. Then finally, what we're looking at is the promotion of best practices. If we support, we have gone through a fairly rigorous and investment in these plans. We want to make sure that these ultimately get built, they're shared, and that we actually leverage the resources that we've already put into things like our infill work, leverage areas that our member agencies, Office of Planning and Research, for example, has done a lot of work related to the general plan guidelines, infill templates to support that, as well as the work around the CEQA guidelines and updating to really support some of the changes in the law related to infill development. What we'd like to do is make sure that there's a way for our grantees to take advantage of that information, of those resources, essentially develop workshops that will support those, and in areas that aren't necessarily the easiest to do infill. Again, the challenge is making sure that our grantees and their communities, wherever they're located, can best implement some of these practices. So looking at beyond some of the main urban cities, beyond San Francisco and LA, but really looking at the Inland Empire. Looking at San Diego, which has challenges. I'm looking at some of the areas in the Central Valley. So not only around infill, but also looking at best practices throughout our grantees and really supporting that. The last item that I wanted to bring forward was in our work plan is a coordination of sorts. This is the cat herding and the silo busting. When we talk about state agencies and their work related to implementing 375 and the metropolitan planning organizations and their direct work in implementing SB 375, there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of issues that have been raised in various venues, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. What we're proposing is a bit of support to just convene and actually provide some technical coordination related to state agency and MPO support. And that would be primarily looking at data issues and also coordination around modeling, not just transportation modeling, but scenario planning, land use modeling, as well as some of the work that I believe Denny mentioned related to regional conservation planning. So just providing a venue for those efforts alone will be fairly significant. That's essentially the overview. I'm happy to answer any questions on the specific components of the work plan. At this point, we're open to comments from the council.
Any discussion of this motion? Yes.
So thank you for the information that you just provided. The items in the report are numbered a little bit differently than on your overhead. So I'm struggling with trying to figure out how to address questions I have. I guess my overall concern with let me just start off by saying that these 6 grant ideas are great ideas. Some are stronger than others in my mind, particularly since what I'm concerned about is that we spend resources to get data that's actually helpful in the work that we're doing, because you can spend a lot of money and do a lot of research and then never actually use it. And that's really what we want, I think, out of the last of these resources, and these are the last of the resources. So let me just say that I think some are better than others. And what I'm concerned about is that because there are 6, there probably is not enough money to do all of them justice. And so I was trying to figure out, is there a way to get information so that we can prioritize the 6 and say item 1 through 3 are the most important, and let's see what comes back in regards to the request for proposals. I want to make sure that they really have applicability to the work that's getting done. And so I have some that I've marked that I think are a little bit more important in the scheme of things. Probably, in my mind, the highest priority is the greenhouse gas reduction quantification, because I think that one is really important as we move into cap and trade, and it'll relate to a conversation we're going to have on the next item, which is that the use of cap and trade dollars in rural communities hasn't been studied enough for us to be able to quantify what the reduction is if we're talking about vehicles. It's my argument that if you build housing for farm workers, you don't have single occupancy vehicles leaving, and so you've already got a transportation system that is reducing greenhouse gases. But that's just there's no data, and so I'd like that one in particular to have a little bit more research done so that we can start quantifying some of that. But my first comment is to make sure that we include rural communities in terms of our research on that particular item. And the technology support, which was item number 2 listed in our packet, it wasn't clear what our long-term goal is in regards to the technology support on that particular item. And so for me, that one didn't rate as one of the highest priorities because I thought it was more internal to our grant recipients as opposed to exterior looking to the community of people that would be using data, and that's a higher priority for me. I think, at least for right now, that's.
If you don't mind, I can speak to. We'll start with the technical. The technical assistance, the technology support. So the idea is actually that we would support, through the SGC as coordinator, a common technology platform for our grantees to provide, to basically house and support the data that's used within each of those planning projects. It's not required. Not something we're requiring grantees to do. However, it's a useful tool to help coordinate and provide basically a hub for that data to, while the plan is being developed, while those projects are being essentially developed, to have that in one centralized source for the users, as kind of a working set of data to be essentially to be housed at that point. Once the plan is adopted, that data, the data that informed that plan, could and we think should ultimately be available to the public. So there's a broader use beyond, so it's an immediate project-specific use, as well as an ultimate greater public use and access to that data for those specific projects. So we're hoping to not reinvent the wheel, but provide some useful tools for coordination, collaboration, as well as ultimately sharing to the general public. Mm-hmm. So that's the first part on that one, on that particular question that you had, Secretary. Mm-hmm. The issue that you raised related to rural communities is a really important one. A good number, and I don't have the exact percentage, of our grantees are rural communities. And we do need to be able to think about how those rural communities are planned for and how do we coordinate them to help support future implementation, whether it be in the future cap and trade auction proceeds program or in other programs. Right. Just help support them, right? And so what we'd like to do is within this set of 6, identify a couple of opportunities for rural communities, for research in those rural communities specific to what we've identified. And we'll certainly keep that in mind as we develop the RFPs and the scopes of the projects.
Okay, that's good. So I think my biggest concern is just that I'm not sure we have enough money to get all of these done to the extent that they're going to be as helpful as you think they are, but I'm willing to be supportive, have you go out and do the work and then come back and let us know that in terms, and I would recommend that in that case, you figure out what priority you want to get them done in, because I'm just not, my experience is $50,000 grants just don't get you much.
It's not a lot.
Yeah.
No, and I think the idea is we wanted to get the full work plan before the council to have some realistic conversation about how we would fulfill this, how would we focus on what's really important. Should we be looking at the fiscal impacts? Should we be talking more about specific best practices and really identifying that and prioritizing? So we'll be happy to do that, but we wanted to get the full scope of the work plan in front of you.
Well, and I think one other thing as a footnote is that at some point I think we're going to need to develop a strategic plan for the organization so that we know where we're going and we can figure out how this all plays into the data we're going to need in the future. And
I'll let Mike answer that question.
Thanks for bringing that up, Secretary. As most council members know, the strategic plan that we're operating under was a plan that sunsets in 2014. This is 2014. Certainly, one of the major assets of bringing Mackenzie Weezer to work with us is having a strategic planner on board. Anybody that can handle DMV's strategic plan can probably handle ours. So this is something that we have our sights set on, and we will be talking to you about this extensively in the coming months.
Okay. Any other discussion? Can we get a motion to approve this work plan? Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Public comments, Heather Adamson.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Heather Adamson. I'm with the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, or AMBAG. As a planning director and a member of the MPO statewide planning working group, I want to express my support for the SGC staff recommendation to encumber the remaining Prop 84 funds. Consistent and ongoing long-term collaboration between state agencies and our regions are very critical to the successful continued implementation of Senate Bill 375. State agencies and MPO staff have been meeting regularly for the past few years and had successful discussions related to SB 375 issues, planning issues, including collaborations on the first target setting process, providing input on the GHG analysis of GHG reduction measures related to transportation and land use, coordinating with the Department of Housing and Community Development on issues related to regional growth forecasts, as well as the regional housing needs assessment process in relation to SB 375 implementation, and collaboration on a report on the statewide performance monitoring indicating for transportation planning. These coordination efforts are beneficial to both state agency staff as well as MPO technical staff to have a venue for conversation and collaboration, and we support the continuation of this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All in favor of the motion? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Item number 7, which is Health and All Policies Task Force. The proposed action is to endorse the 2014 Active Transportation Action Plan, a multi-level and multifaceted approach to advance policy and program changes that will result in increased opportunities for safe and accessible active transportation. I want to introduce Julia Kaplan, who's the Program Director of the Health and All Policies Program, housed in the Department of Public Health.
Great. Good afternoon, and thank you, Vice Chair Fisher and members of the council, and also hello to the members of the public who are here today. So my name is Julia Kaplan. I lead the Health and All Policies Task Force Facilitation Team in the Department of Public Health, and I'm here on behalf of the task force today. Where do I point this? There we go. Okay. So I'm on the agenda to share information with you about the Health and All Policies Task Force's work on active transportation, and also to ask for your support and endorsement of the new active transportation plan. The task force has identified active transportation as a priority for a number of reasons, specifically because of its role in promoting public health, through physical activity, through better air quality, and also because of the environmental impacts of reducing vehicle miles traveled and therefore greenhouse gas emissions. And we could spend a long time listing other co-benefits, but there are many reasons. And we have 2 documents that we're presenting to you today that are in your packets. The first is an action report, and this summarizes the outcomes accomplished through our previous active transportation implementation plan over the last 3 years. This is also the first time in the task force's history. This task force is fairly young. It was just created in 2010. This is the first time that the task force has completed an implementation plan and has documented its progress for the SGC and also for the public, and also is launching a new implementation plan. So it's been an exploratory process and a very exciting one. 2021. The report that you have, I'm not going to walk through today, but it is important as a way to track our progress, demonstrate the value of this approach, and also as a reporting mechanism. And what I am going to focus on today is the action plan, which is also in your packet, and this represents the task force's renewed commitment to active transportation. It's a new work plan. It contains objectives and activities, very specific commitments, as well as an accompanying narrative. Both of these, the previous plan and the current plan, are based on input from over 20 state departments, agencies, and offices, from a long list of local government and community organizations, and a wide number of experts in active transportation policy. And I thought I would just ask for people here, if you would just raise your hand if you've been involved in the task force in some way, whether it's great, as task force members, as key informants. So thank you all for the role that you've played in this. The task force action plan itself, I'm not going to be able to walk through really the details of it today, but I want to call out some of the themes and values and then some of the highlights. And the task force itself adds value to state government by advancing broad state priorities that really cut across agencies and departments, and by supporting alignment between agencies and departments around those priorities. So this includes coordinating disparate groups that are pursuing similar goals or facing similar challenges. The task force is really a venue for engagement around this kind of work and allows us to progress on issues that no one department could actually progress on working on their own. Some of the key themes of this plan include mode shift. So the old approach of the previous health and all policies active transportation work was really to create infrastructure to give people more choice in how they got places. This plan takes I would say a bolder approach around mode shift and really suggests that we could actively encourage people to change the way that they use transportation. We've also prioritized safety. If we increase walking and biking, we also expose more people to getting hit by cars and risking injury of death. This is very serious, and every stakeholder group I've spoken with has brought up safety as a key priority. Safety is also a key equity issue. People in low-income communities and communities of color are more likely to use active transportation and are more likely to be hit by cars because of less safe infrastructure. And so by improving safety infrastructure and policies, we're improving health outcomes and reducing inequities. Systems change is the idea that this isn't just about making changes one program or one intersection at a time, but this is really about embedding health equity and environmental sustainability into the very fabric of how we make decisions and how we allocate resources from the start. Collaboration I've already talked about, and I wanted to highlight the voluntary piece because while there's an executive order creating the task force, there was no funding given to any of the departments who participate. So all of the commitments in here are being made by departments because they see value in this work for achieving their own missions. There's a very strong focus on win-wins to ensure that this is really meeting the needs of our broad membership. The action plan itself is both a visionary document and also a very practical to-do list. And while the task force began with many low-hanging fruit actions in 2010, 2011, this plan reflects a deep trust that has been built over 4 years of work and includes many what I would call really stretch items. These are items that require a big commitment from staff, from departments, from leadership, and quite complex coordination of efforts. We got a long list of a fairly large wish list from the public in our first couple of years, and many of those items that we couldn't achieve initially are included in this plan. Some of the highlights of this plan include embedding health and equity in long-range planning documents, such as the Regional Transportation Plan Guidelines, the California Transportation Plan 2040, and also grant-making programs. And the task force plans to engage public health and other stakeholders in giving input and really embed health equity and sustainability in these planning documents and guidelines from the very beginning. We also have a number of items related to disseminating guidance, tools, and other materials. The task force provides really a unique opportunity to do this across sectors. So we may have guidance or materials related to active transportation that are really useful in affordable housing work around first and last mile planning, for example. We also have a section dedicated to supporting active transportation in school environments, and we have a land use, schools, and health work group that will continue that work, and we're excited to add to that group the Division of the State Architect, which is a direct result of the Department of General Services joining the task force during the past year. The task force also felt that it was important for the state to model our own commitment to active transportation, and so we have a section of actions related to promoting walking and biking for state employees. And nearly every agency, department, organization that we spoke with had concerns about data related to active transportation and the lack of metrics for this goal. And so the California State Transportation Agency is taking leadership on this piece, and over 10 agencies and departments have committed to forming a multi-agency working group to address the lack of metrics and really work on data issues, and also to explore creating a statewide goal for mode shift. So of course, right now it's just a plan, and the key is seeing this work carried out. So this slide shows a list of the many different organizations and agencies that have committed to supporting this plan. The next steps for us include convening a series of multi-agency working groups and meetings around key topics such as land use, schools, and health, data, and others, to develop timelines and milestones. And I'm here today to ask for your overall support for this work, and also to request the Strategic Growth Council's endorsement of this plan. There are a number of ways that you can support this plan. One is to continue what you're already doing of supporting a culture of collaboration across agencies, and to really give the green light to your staff within your agencies and your departments to dedicate staff time to this work and make this a priority. And then per the executive order that formed the task force reports to the Strategic Growth Council, and so it's important to the task force to have the endorsement of the SGC as this work moves forward. So I am going to stick around for questions, but before I did that, I wanted to ask Kate White to come up and say a few words. I have not lined up a long list of task force members to speak, but Kate is, I wanted her to share a few words, both in her role as one of the leaders within the State Transportation Agency and also as an active participant in the Health and All Policies Task Force.
Yeah, I'll just be real quick. I just wanted to thank Julia and the Health and All Policy Task Force for their leadership on active transportation these quite a few years now, and it's really been a pleasure to work with them, and also engaging all our departments, a number of our departments, CHP, DMV, Caltrans, of course, with our active transportation program, and the agency, and we are real excited to continue this work and get going with it. So thank you.
So I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions or discussion of this motion?
I'd like to move adoption to put it on the floor.
Second.
Okay. Let's,
Yeah, just wanted to, again, like Kate did, commend you, Julia, for all your work. I think we've had great collective success to date. One of the metrics that we can look to is this group, the League of American Bicyclists, ranks states based on bicycle-friendly nature of the state, and California moved from 19th to 9th in this last year. And they cited the creation of a significant ongoing funding program with the active transportation program, and also the legislation that passed last year, AB 1371, the 3-foot bike space when cars are passing, is very positive developments. And interestingly, we'd been talking to Caltrans about a goal of moving into the top 10, and then it happened within a few months. So perhaps, now we have a top 5 goal for bike friendliness. We'll work on that. But I think we have a good chance of advancing again because of the work you're doing and the group's doing. And also, again, we've had some new funding opportunities with the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities grant program. We'll, of course, be talking about more today. And again, some new legislation being passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. There was a bill, AB 1193 by Assemblymember Ting, that requires Caltrans to develop specifications for protected bikeways, which we are finding that a lot of bicyclists are intimidated by being close to cars, and that's a barrier for some of them, that safety perception. And I think some of the separations are improvements and are successful in bringing more bicyclists out. And also by Senator DeSaulnier, SB 1183, that added a option for local agencies to impose a $5 surcharge on the annual vehicle fee that they can use to support bike infrastructure. So again, great progress is being made, and thank you for your efforts.
Other comments? Okay, we have 3 public comments. Wendy Alfson. After that, we have Jeannie Warwaller.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm Wendy Alfton with California Walks. And I just wanted to say, from a public, what guys all call external stakeholder viewpoint, we really want to support this effort. We've been involved in trying to make it happen at all stages along the way, and we're really pleased with the progress. And I think this is yet another example of the important work that the Strategic Growth Council has initiated and the leadership you've demonstrated for all the rest of California. And look forward to its implementation of that new plan. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Jeannie? And next is Joshua Stark.
Good afternoon, council members. Is this on? Okay. Jeannie Wardwaller with the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. I'm also in strong support of the implementation plan. We provided input through the development and really look forward to working on continuing to move this work forward. We have a statewide network that I know is very interested in almost all of these efforts, so we'll certainly continue to be involved with the task force and appreciate your support.
Thank you. Joshua Stark. And then Ruben Cantu.
Hi, Joshua Stark, Policy Director for Transform. We're pleased to support the Health and All Policies Active Transportation Active Plan. The plan does a strong job of focusing in on key opportunities over the next 2 years, and we look forward to partnering with the task force on several of these. For example, with the passage of AB 441 in 2012, a bill we co-sponsored, the regional transportation guidelines will be updated to include a section on improving health and equity. HEAP provides an excellent link educating and empowering the public, health, and other communities about this and opportunities like it. Transform looks forward to working with the HEAP task force on the Active Transportation Action Plan, and we respectfully urge your endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruben Cantu.
Ruben Cantu with the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network, CPAN. We're a statewide health advocacy organization working to improve the health of communities of color in California. And we're in support of the Active Transportation Implementation Plan. We've worked with the task force and the staff on the importance of transportation, everything from access to healthy transportation, access to transportation to active transportation, and its implications for health, especially for communities of color. So we're very much in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can we get a vote? All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay, thank you. On to item number 8, which is going to take the rest of the time. Let me introduce Mike McCoy, who's going to present I guess there are 2 pieces of the presentation, Mike, is that right? There's both the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation and also the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program.
That's right, and I'll just introduce all 4 of the speakers that will follow. I think that's the last one. I was going to do a drum roll along with those, but it just didn't work out right. First of all, I want to say that I certainly appreciate the governor's support, your support, the legislature's support in recognizing the third leg of the greenhouse gas reduction stool. It really is critical and difficult to achieve greenhouse gas reductions from a transformation of our urban planning, but it is, in the long run, the most sustainable and effective tool that we have for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. It's easy to see why fuels and fleets come early to our thoughts, because this is science we can manage. Now we're talking about managing landscapes and communities and assisting people making decisions that lead to more sustainable communities and lifestyles. Definitely a more challenging environment, but certainly a worthwhile one, and I'm really glad we're at the doorstep of doing this together. We're going to have a presentation that goes through and really in a way symbolizes the sort of unity that we've developed as staff across your agencies in this process. We're going to start out with Julie Alvis, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Natural Resources Agency, who will talk about the ag land conservation component of this program, followed by Kate White, Assistant Secretary, California State Transportation Agency, Susan Riggs, Assistant Secretary, Business Consumer Services and Housing, and finally Allison Joe, Deputy Director of the Strategic Growth Council. Julie?
Let me also make one quick comment just from a process standpoint. We're going to have the Ag Lands Conservation Program presented. We'll have council discussion. Then we'll go on and present the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, have council discussion on that, and then invite for public comments. We are not approving anything today. This is really the best and really the only major opportunity that the council has, both to hear public comments and to discuss these two really important programs when we're all together. So please proceed.
Well, thank you, council members. I'm happy to be here today to talk about the current status of the Agricultural Lands Conservation Program. I've been working very closely with the Department of Conservation and the Department of Food and Agriculture to put together the draft guidelines that are now posted to the website for public comment. I'll just quickly give a brief overview of where we are headed. So in preparing the draft guidelines, we've wanted to develop a program with these three goals, primarily to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, providing other co-benefits, to focus the investments on ag lands, which are most at risk of conversion, our most important agricultural lands, and to also leverage the investments of the funding from this program, knowing that there isn't a lot of dollars. We want to make sure that we maximize that, and it also gives us opportunities to partner with local, federal, private entities as well. So in working up a program, we've really met with a wide variety of stakeholders that provided a lot of really great initial input. And we first came up with a program concept which focused on three elements. Those are there on the slide: strategy planning, easements, and then management practices. That's on-farm conservation management practices that landowners can implement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to provide really a great number of benefits. The draft guidelines that are posted now for public comment really address only the first two of these elements, the strategy and the easements. We, of course, have draft guidelines that will be used as the solicitation document once approved. And we have focused it to the amount of funding that we have in the current appropriation. So any future plans of bringing in one of the last element of management practices would come before you again, giving us a time to really figure out how we would want to bring that in. So I'm going to talk very quickly about the first two elements here. The first are agricultural land strategy grants. We anticipate awarding up to $1 million for strategy grants. This would be for grant awards up to $100,000 with required 10% local match. These are projects that will help counties and cities do the necessary work to identify those important critical ag land resources within their regions. Some regions are farther along in really understanding their conservation priorities in terms of conservation, in terms of ag land. Some may need further funding to help them get to that point. And so this section is really designed to help those communities get there. The second piece of the program is to focus funding on conservation easements themselves. We would require a substantial match, knowing that we would have $4 million available in this first year for this piece of the program. So we'd require a 50% match toward the direct easement acquisition total. And again, these are easements that are really focused on agricultural lands that are at risk of conversions, that really contribute to our overall goals. Told you I'd be brief. So the guidelines are posted now for public comment. I understand we've already started to receive a few questions, so I really appreciate, again, all of the interest from the stakeholders out there. We've received a lot of initial very, very positive comments, and we appreciate that. We have some upcoming workshops. They have not been posted to the webpage yet. We are actively trying to finalize our third workshop location, which will be in the Watsonville area. But Friday, October 24th, we will be in Oroville, October 29th in Bakersfield, and October 30th in the Watsonville area. So we look forward to hearing a lot more feedback at that time. I also just want to thank the Department of Conservation and Food and Ag for all of the work they've been doing.
Thanks very much. Comments or discussion among council members? Secretary Laird.
Well, I want to thank Julie as well for the work on this, and I think what you just heard in the presentation is a very good presentation of trying to take what is a relatively small amount of money in the scheme of this and leverage it against other contributions and try to deal with the fact that in terms of the Williamson Act, really, I know I said at one of these meetings that it was hanging by a thread, and I have now read that quoted all over the place since then, but it is. And this, I think, is some measure to begin the discussion. If that doesn't get funded again in a significant way, what we do. And I think what it does is it works with a certain number of counties and cities, if that's relevant, in really looking at prioritizing what are the lands that are most at risk of development in those particular areas. And then without waiting for a second or third year, trying to use the balance of the money to do easements for things that are at risk right now. And with understanding that as this moves forward, we'll have the results of what comes from these grants. And we'll begin to have the discussion of what we can do next. And we're just very conscious that it's in the context of cap and trade and greenhouse gas reductions, but that it serves these larger needs. And I know the Secretary of Food and Ag has been very committed to this as well. And I did note that the third hearing might be in Secretary Caballero's former assembly district, so we're focusing, when you look at where those three are, they're really in the regions where this is most at risk. And I couldn't help but note in Mike's executive director report for the person on high-speed rail, the maps that really talked about when that development happens, about how development around the high-speed rail might really impact ag land. So we are really trying to deal with this process. And we were given a reprieve by the economic downturn on development pressures in some of these areas, and as the economy has come back, so have they. So this is a very important thing, and I really look forward. We tried to also accommodate some of the comments that people might still make in the public process here, because I think everybody sees this in a way that they see everything they want in it. And I sort of see $5 million and think, how much can you see in that unless you leverage many other things? And I think there were comments about getting things on the table, at least if this program continues in certain ways for years going ahead. And if you saw at least the third category, I think it was the attempt to address that. So I think given the amount of money and given the real public policy need, this is a really good direction.
Thank you. Secretary Ross.
Thank you, and I also want to thank Natural Resources and the Department of Conservation. It's been a very collaborative process, and I think you've come up with a good starting place. I also want to remind people here and anyone who may be watching this on the web, it's really important to take that step of being engaged in these public workshops, because Secretary Laird's exactly right. It is a critical time to have this discussion about how we conserve farmland, coming at a time when we also think about the water for that farmland and how the landscape has already changed significantly. But when we think about the previous report on health and all policies and the strong desire to be able to source more food locally and to be able to do that in a very sustainable way, it's a really important time for all of us to be engaged in this discussion. Earlier this year, the California Roundtable on Agriculture and the Environment released its report. And so I hope that we'll have a lot of active engagement throughout these workshops and really provide you some good input about what we can do with $5 million and what we need to be building for in the future. So I want to thank you all for your work.
Thank you. Other comments? Julie, I had one question. That was, how does this program coordinate with the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program?
Well, I actually heard a good phrase, and I think it's applicable, is it's really the other side of the equation. So when we're focusing investments on infill, we also need to be very cognizant of the lands that surround. And so I've been also participating on the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program, which is the next presentation here, to make sure that investments that we grant through that program, we'll also consider what those entities are doing in terms of understanding their ag, their open space resources, and likewise, as part of our goal here is to really be strategic in the lands we pick as part of this program that are most at risk or right on those borders that could be developed. So I really think it's absolutely one program. It's administratively different just because we're talking about different types of projects here. It just makes it a lot more efficient, both for staff and for applicants, to compete against like projects, knowing that the goals really are overarching.
Have we considered giving additional points in these two programs to proposals that are coordinated?
We do have questions in our scoring criteria that speak to that, where they need to demonstrate how they are, why this particular strategy or this easement really applies to those lands that are most critical. Likewise, in the affordable housing side, it speaks mostly to the state planning priorities, but that's a threshold requirement, and one of the state planning priorities is your consideration of of ag land protection, open space protection.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just a quick question, and that's in terms of data availability to know what's at risk and who will determine highest risk areas. Are we relying on local governments or regional agencies to do that, or the state to do that? And do we have a way to sort of check it to make sure that we are getting at ag lands that are at highest risk?
So the way that the grant program is currently structured, the proposed structure is that it would be counties that we would be asking in partnership with other entities to develop that data. Department of Conservation for years has been doing exactly that through their farmland conservation program. So certainly as a requirement for getting the grant funding, we would have an expectation that that data is shared with the, with the state. And as far as the details of how that all works, I mean, we would, certainly rely on Department of Conservation's experience, and so I guess yes.
Yeah.
Okay, no other discussion about ag lands. We'll have public comments later. I guess we'll shift now to our next presenter for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program.
Great.
You're back,
Thank you
Kate.
so much. Yes, I'm back. Kate White, Deputy Secretary at the State Transportation Agency, and very pleased to present our progress to date on developing the guidelines on the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program. It's been a real pleasure to work with Julie. Thank you for your presentation and overview. I think we've met every week for many months to develop this program, and it is two sides of the coin. And so I will be presenting a few slides, and then I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues, Susan and Allison, to wrap up. So the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, the draft guidelines were posted several weeks ago. And today we're going to cover just real quickly, we're not starting at the very beginning because we did that last time. We're focusing today on the purpose of the program framework, opportunities for public comment, the estimated timeline for the program rollout, and issues for your discussion today. And to allow time for the council's discussion and public comment, we're keeping this presentation quite brief, really focusing on the latest developments. There's more background. If there's a link for those watching as well, you can click on this link, and it's posted to the Strategic Growth Council website. These are the workshop presentations that we had over the summer on this program. We got lots of input. Several hundred people attended workshops over the last few months. So the purpose of the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program, what are we looking for? What's the purpose here? So really we're looking for projects that will increase accessibility of housing, employment centers, and key destinations via low carbon transportation options. So that's walking, biking, transit, really resulting in fewer vehicle miles traveled. So how can we make it easy, simple, cheaper, accessible to be able to get to work, to key destinations, everything you need, drop off your kids to school without getting in your car? So the program will provide grants and affordable housing loans for infill and compact transit-oriented development projects and related infrastructure and program activities. So those are the kinds of things we're looking to fund. Paramount is that projects must demonstrate GHG reductions that focus on vehicle mile traveled reductions, VMT. Projects may also demonstrate ancillary GHG reductions through other strategies such as improved energy efficiency, sequestration, other reductions or emissions avoidance. So we're focused on VMT, but we're also interested in other ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we're looking for working very closely with the Air Resources Board, again on almost a weekly basis, to develop the methodologies and the reporting requirements that are being established by ARB to determine how these funded projects will reduce GHG, really using the latest research, the latest empirical data that is available around, yes, kind of a complicated set of projects, but absolutely demonstrates that these types of projects reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In terms of who's eligible to apply, a public agency that has jurisdiction over the area where this project is going to go is a required co-applicant, but all these other entities can apply as jointly or with a public agency. So we're looking at joint powers authorities, public housing authorities, developers, transit agencies and operators, school districts, facilities, or other special districts. All of those are eligible applicants. And then in terms of the key program thresholds, we're looking at reducing GHG, as I stated, through reduced vehicle miles traveled, mode shift from single occupancy vehicles. We're looking for consistency with sustainable community strategies or similar planning documents where sustainable community strategies are not required. And of course, consistent with the state planning priorities per your priorities here at the Strategic Growth Council. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Susan.
That's okay. Good afternoon. So Kate kind of kicked off part of the presentation that really begins to delve into how we're proposing to evaluate the projects that ultimately will come to you guys mid next year for approval. So this slide really gets into kind of just the threshold evaluation that we're going to do, which obviously paramount in that is the ability to demonstrate GHG reductions through VMT reduction. So I don't need to dwell on this anymore, but what you'll see, I'm just going to kind of walk through, it's chart 3. If you've scoured through your guidelines, you'll notice that this is chart 3 on page 32 of your guidelines, for those of you who want to follow along. So we've got the threshold review. This is really just kind of a way to filter out those projects that really aren't even going to meet minimal benchmarks for the types of projects we want to see. And then the next place is really we're going to take the projects, we're proposing to take the projects through one of two doors. A transit-oriented development door, which is really the traditional transit-oriented development projects that we've seen in the past through the Prop 1C, TOD, and IIG programs that we've spoken about in the past. And then the second category is a new one that I'll talk a little bit more about. We're proposing right now to allocate between these two categories 40% and 40% of the overall funding in the TOD category and 30% in the other category, and that leaves us, obviously that doesn't add up to 100%, that leaves us about 30% wiggle room based upon the types of projects that we're receiving in each of the categories. I'm going to get there, yeah. So it is Integrated Connectivity Projects, clever new acronym that everybody will be using soon, ICPs. So it's going to be the next TOD. Everybody's going to be talking about it. So it's the next TOD. So these are the two.
Ever brief the governor, you're going to have to say it all out.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So two categories. Again, the transit-oriented development projects are the typical ones that we've seen. Half-mile radius of transit service that has 15-minute headways. Pretty typical things that we're accustomed to doing. Obviously, one of the things that we've heard a lot about is, ensuring that there's a representation of different types of development types throughout the state. Not all smaller cities, suburban areas, rural areas are going to have those types of transit services available to them. And so we want to ensure that there is the ability for other parts of the state to be competitive. And so that's where the integrated connectivity projects come in. And we've actually created separate criteria, scoring criteria for both of the projects, and the expectations in these categories are very different. Really at the core of this, aside from the geographic aspects, are really what's expected in terms of the project components. In the TOD component and the transit-oriented development component, we're anticipating that all projects are going to include an aspect of affordable housing. Doesn't necessarily have to be funded through this program, but it does need to integrate affordable housing as a project use. In addition, it has to have at least two capital uses, one of which can be affordable housing but doesn't have to be. So in this first category with the green heading, you have to have two of those in the TOD category. In the ICP, the second category, we're anticipating that you have to have at least one capital use in the first category, and the second use can be out of either category, one of which must be an infrastructure investment. All right, so those are your two doors. The development proponents have to check a box, go through a door. Those that are available, those that are eligible for the transit-oriented development category are not eligible in the second category, the ICP category. So as we move down, the next thing we'll be doing is evaluating, based upon your typical scored criteria, the projects on a variety of different criteria. And really, we've broken these down into three major buckets. The first, feasibility and readiness, accounts for about 35 to 40% of the overall scoring. Connectivity and improved access, and I'll go into more of what these are moving forward, 40 to 45%, and community orientation, 15 to 20%. So the first one really acknowledges the need to demonstrate very quickly the efficacy of this program. We want to demonstrate that we can get projects on the ground that have substantial impacts on the ability to bring down VMT and have and move us towards our goals under AB 32. So the weighting of this project and the types of scored criteria in this category really do acknowledge that. We want to see that there are entitlements in place. We want to see that CEQA review has been done, and we want to make sure that there's anticipated or other funding sources that are already in place that can be leveraged to ensure that the project can be fully funded. The second category, connectivity and improved access, is really, the meat and potatoes of the program. We want to create accessibility. We want to create connections in our communities between land uses. So we've put in a variety of criteria to demonstrate, for the project to demonstrate how it's connecting, housing to job opportunities, housing and mixed use to transportation alternatives, to get people out of single passenger vehicles, all of those things. And so we've got a variety of scored criteria in there that help us to identify those things. Finally, community orientation. This includes the integration of affordable housing. It's a sliding scale that really recognizes those projects that provide deeper affordability. I'll say, some of the feedback that we've gotten is that this is, affordable housing is a very important part of this program, and why is it in a category that has, is limited in terms of the overall impact. The reality is that we know that, the broader bucket is 50% of the money is going to be invested in affordable housing, and so there's kind of this umbrella that already tells us we're going to be investing in affordable housing. What we want to see here is, what does that affordable housing look like? Who's it serving? And so we're anticipating that we'll weight that criteria based upon the affordability levels. Anti-displacement strategies to ensure that we're not displacing the very residents that we're trying to assist. The extent to which the project addresses co-benefits, as we know, that's part of the statutory requirement. We want to ensure that there's co-benefits that are integrated into the project overall. And finally, community engagement. We want to, see where development proponents are going above and beyond, the typical entitlement process, and maybe, reaching out to historically disenfranchised communities by giving lifting their voice up, providing them access to the decision-making process and removing barriers that have traditionally existed, language, translation services, childcare, meetings at night, those types of things. Okay, so back to chart 3 on page 32. So we've gotten to the cumulative score based upon that scoring criteria. We're going to run it through again a GHG based scoring module that we're still working with ARB to kind of fully flesh out. And then finally, as I alluded to earlier, we've got the two kind of umbrella requirements. 50% of the investments need to be made in affordable housing, and 50% of the investments need to be made in a way that benefit disadvantaged communities. I just want to ensure that there's clarity that these can be overlapping, they can be mutually exclusive. The investment in disadvantaged community can be affordable housing, but doesn't necessarily have to be affordable housing, and vice versa. So that's going to be the last kind of filter, and then ultimately we will be bringing a recommendation to this council for input and approval potentially. All right, with that, I'm going to pass over to Allison Joe. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to flip back to this one because it's a good slide. It's a little bit complicated. It's a good slide in that it really identifies the complexity of this program. What I didn't want to, what we haven't had a chance to do is acknowledge the teamwork that has been involved from our SGC member agencies and departments. Every SGC member agency is represented through this program, through the development of both program guidelines. A lot of work, everyone from High Speed Rail, Caltrans, Department of Public Health, Cal EPA, ARB, it's the alphabet soup, kind of like the Strategic Growth Council itself. And this is complicated, and we acknowledge that. What we were tasked with is also very complicated, and so that's where we really want to make sure that there's an understanding at the very basic level of what we're trying to do here, make sure that we achieve our programmatic and statutory goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, also by recognizing disadvantaged communities, the co-benefits that are associated with this program, as well as back to the very point of getting things done and building projects that really meet those goals. So this is a hard slide. It's a complicated slide. It has a whole lot going on, but we really want to make sure that there has been a lot of thought to this process. Just for my colleagues who are sitting in the audience who have been a part of this, I may, at this next phase of the presentation, you may want to come up a little closer. They're not scary. They may look scary. They may look intimidating. The charts are more intimidating than the council, yes. So that's just my caveat there. I wanted to walk through the application process because at the end of the day, we are going to ask our constituencies and the local governments and the proposed applicants to go through this process. We want to make sure that this is clear, that we provide a really good understanding of what our expectations are before they get into the thick of things. So we're looking at a proposed application process. It's essentially two major phases. One, looking at a program concept. What are you proposing to build? Are you meeting all your threshold requirements? Does it show readiness? Does your budget make sense? Who are you working with? And then on top of that, particularly related to the threshold, this is where we're starting to talk about other partners who are involved in the review of these applications. It's mentioned in the staff report, but not in this presentation directly or in the guidelines, the work with the metropolitan planning organizations and regional agencies. We hope that in this initial concept phase that they will partner with us to help identify things that they are, again, statutorily mandated to do, look at reduction of GHG emissions, and also make sure that their regional sustainable community strategy plans are ultimately implemented by the local projects being proposed for funding here. So once those concepts have met that initial threshold and review by both the state and MPOs, we're looking at a full application, an invite for a full application. This is kind of based on and piggybacking from the work that we did in our urban greening program. We found that was far more successful in getting the initial ideas out so that we knew what was out there, we knew what was ready, we knew what we could then ask to move forward on, and we also knew what we could provide potentially technical support on. So this is, again, making sure that there is a pipeline in the future. There's plenty of projects to fund. Let's make sure we get the most ready ones to us first, and then and review them appropriately without having to put a lot of time and resources from those local applicants into a full application when they're not quite ready. The other thing that we have, and also at this full application point, we're looking at similarly concurrent review from both the state and the regional entities. Again, there's a lot to be learned from each other, and I think we have in this considered how the full application and review of that and comparison of notes and scores could actually provide some benefit, a lot of benefit. In this, we also propose the consideration of site visits for those projects. Again, from our urban greening program, we found that the value of getting down to the site on the ground and really finding out what's happening, who's really championing it to the extent, whether it's just nominal or if it's really meaningful. And then with that, we would then end up providing recommendations to you sometime next year. Another thing that we wanted to talk about is just generally some expectations related to awards, particularly in this fiscal year. For this fiscal year, the budget appropriates $120 million total for this program. That excludes the Sustainable Ag Lands Conservation Program and some administrative costs. What we want to try to do is identify a range of awards based on about the range of potential awards based on the parameters we've set and expectations we've set for both transit-oriented development projects and integrated connectivity projects. With $120 million, this does not fund a lot of projects. However, what we want to do is set expectations on how this might come about, and maybe raise the issue related to some geographic parity of awards, if that is something that is of consideration to the council. We're going to go through timelines. We mentioned this earlier. We've seen this. This looks familiar to many of you who've gone to our workshops. We've got two boxes checked off, and we're really excited about that. We can't wait for the rest of this to get through the rest of it, but we know that this is going to take some work. We're hoping that in later this October we will have 4 public workshops, which will be 2 of which will be webcast and/or recorded for future viewing. And also, we hope to have really meaningful engagement with those stakeholders. The first set of workshops in August were incredibly successful. We were able to find, we were oversubscribed. We had over 450 participants in 3 workshops. We had to do interesting crowd control and management of those. But I think we had interactive workshops. This wasn't just a presentation. This was getting in, having, sitting around a table and recording thoughts about what we could do with this program. I think in terms of the expectations for October, we'd like to do something not quite as staff intensive, but equally engaging and informative. The guidelines that we have developed are not they're not fully complete. There are a lot of blanks, there are a lot of questions that still remain to be answered, and we expect that these workshops will help us inform the future and really flesh out the guidelines. We're looking forward to having people point out where we went wrong. I will say that now and probably regret that later. So overall, the workshop, we will finish workshops and we'll provide final guidelines for your review and hopefully adoption in December. We hope to release the funding solicitation by January, provide those, again, preliminary applications, the phase 1 concepts due in February, full applications due once invited, the full applications due in April, and potential site visits, again, in that April-May timeframe. This is, as it has been described, an unforgiving schedule. And we are working the best we can to make sure that we meet these deadlines, achieve the goals of this, and again, for $120 million, make sure that we guarantee future funding. As I mentioned, opportunities for public comment. We have 4 workshops. We will take public comments at that time. We are also, written comments to inform the guidelines can be and must be submitted to our central website, our email address by the end of October. We're also hoping to develop more of a web platform where you can submit comments. Thanks, Mackenzie, for doing that. She's only been on the job for a couple of days, but I think we'll be able to put something up soon. No pressure. And so that's the end of the month for that. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to flag, and we're going to pause on this just to get some council discussion. One, I've outlined the role of the metropolitan planning organizations. We just wanted to make sure that there was some acknowledgement. We're working with them. We hope to develop that. There are some questions about certainty and meaningfulness of their ultimate recommendations to the council. They are involved in the review process, but the question remains in terms of how will that be incorporated in our final recommendation? That has not been determined yet. Award size, again, based on what you saw in terms of the distribution of funds and the award size as stated in the draft guidelines. Does this seem appropriate for the types of projects we're trying to support? This is also in consideration of the leverage that we're requiring. So again, this is not the be-all, end-all. We are not funding a $15 million project and that is your gap. Your gap is much bigger than that and you've leveraged it successfully. But is that appropriate given the nature of these projects? Geographic distribution. Should these guidelines contain any kind of target, percentage, or amount to support different regions to ensure a distribution given the types of projects we're trying to support and the goals of our program. And finally, GHG quantification. As was mentioned, ARB is working very hard to try to provide guidance to all of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund programs. We appreciate their support. We know that they're working hard on this. The question then becomes, should this reduction be a threshold, beyond a threshold, and scored based on the amount of reductions in relation to the funding request and or scope. So we're talking about scaling. Is that something that is of interest? Are there other things that we should be considering to that respect? So I'm going to, per direction from the chair, leave and pause right now and allow for some council discussion on these issues and other things. I'm happy to rely on my backup in case there's other questions I can't answer. And there are a lot of questions that to remain to be answered. So happy to help in any way. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can we do clarification questions?
Sure, please.
Before discussion, if you don't mind.
Sure,
Just
absolutely.
a question of clarification. I've only been on the council 3 days, but I did read this whole packet. And I'm sort of curious because I want to clarify that what I think I read is true because I got a little confused in the presentation. Whenever you reference in here housing development as a project, all housing development has to have an affordable component. Am I correct with that?
So,
because I was a little confused when the affordability threshold was discussed in this third category, and I sort of assumed that that was the level of affordability that was discussed there. But when I read it, I thought that every housing project that was a part of this had some affordability component.
So the clarification is that in order to be funded by this program, the housing component must be affordable. However, you can have a mixed income project with market rate housing and affordable housing included as part of the bigger project.
Absolutely.
And Susan, you're going to correct me, which is great.
Sorry. So the TOD projects must have an affordability component.
Mm-hmm.
The ICP program, the projects do not have to have affordability in order to be funded through the program.
Right.
But let me emphasize again, the TOD program, that category, the affordable housing doesn't have to be funded through this program.
Understood.
So if it's a tax credit project or something like that, as long as it's integrated as part of the project
Understood.
uses. Okay.
Just to, go ahead.
Quick follow-up. So if there's a transit-oriented development project that's not in a disadvantaged community that is mixed, the money has to go for the affordable piece of it.
No.
See, that's where you got me confused. Because the two circles
Yes.
talk about affordability and disadvantaged community. So why would any of the affordability money go to a project that's the part of it that's not affordable?
Yeah. So let me talk.
And isn't there a simple way to talk about that?
Well, so in theory, you could have a project that is being funded through this program that is in a disadvantaged community or benefits a disadvantaged community that does not include any affordable housing component.
Right.
The practical is that because 50% of the funding is going to be applied, is going to be invested in a way that creates affordable housing, the practical piece of that is because our projects are anticipated to have multiple uses, both affordable housing, mixed use, active transportation, complete streets, all of those things, the practical implication of that is that more likely than not, most projects vast majority of projects are going to have an affordable housing component of some sort because 50% of the money needs to be invested to create affordable housing. And so when those other project components that are coming in that are being spent out of the other 50% of the house are being attached to that project, then am I muddying the waters even further?
No,
Sorry.
well, let me ask it a different way. if we're trying to prioritize affordable housing, how are we doing it by doing that?
So if you remember on the chart 3, I don't know if you guys can go back to chart 3 real quick. The very last filter we're going to go through is we've scored all the projects in the 2 different categories, the interconnected, the ICP programs projects and the TOD projects. And so both of them are going to be scored independently, and they're going to come down at the very last filter that's going to happen is as you come down, it's being scored. And the very last filter we're going to apply is based upon our priority projects that have been scored and the top scoring projects, we need to make sure that 50% of those are benefiting disadvantaged communities, and 50% of those have a have
See,
a
the
total
thing
amount
I
of
was
money.
asking was about this chart.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you've gone to this chart. And so when I said, okay, you factor out the 50% disadvantaged community, does that mean that the 50% that's the affordable housing requirement goes just for affordable housing?
Yes. So.
Oh, that's all I was asking.
Oh, well,
That's why I didn't understand why there was a long explanation.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's the disadvantaged community that you were just talking about, that really that's where you have to factor in all the different things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be affordable, and you're trying to get housing into a disadvantaged community.
Yeah, what I thought I heard you say was if it's in a disadvantaged
Well,
community.
you see, I
you
was
have to
playing
include
off of your
affordable
answer
housing.
to this question because it sort of said, I read that you answered the opposite in answer to her. So I was trying to ask, isn't that true? So you'd say yes, and we would get to it.
Can we help confuse the matter further? I just...
No.
Overruled.
You can only speak if you're unconfusing it.
I just said, if a particular feature associated with affordable housing is a condition of approval for that affordable housing, we may pay for that item that's the condition of approval and not for the housing, just to keep the record straight. So we might pay for a stormwater drain that is the very last thing needed in order for that affordable housing unit to be built, in which case we consider that the building of affordable housing.
That's helpful, and I get that. And I think that, you see, the thing, my misfortune was to be a mayor and a council member in the 80s. And the Carter era and prior housing programs were being phased out. There was still some leftover money. There were all these stupid credit systems that allowed people that had a lot of money to bring it to affordable housing projects. And you were trying to put together 12 or 14 different funding sources or different things and tell everybody it meant what they wanted it to mean to them to build affordable housing. And I think that's what you're just saying is you can do that. But what I'm trying to understand is, given the controversies over affordable housing, over the fact that it's way behind and people aren't building it and they're looking for different ways to be successful, I'm looking to understand how this leverages things and sort of goes way past the investment we're making to make it really successful. And I mean, in the ideal world, you'd find one that was fully funded except for the storm drain, and you'd put the money in for the storm drain. That'd push them over, and that would get you a certain number of units rather than having to just do the core funding for it. And I'm trying to understand in this long presentation how we do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think our hope is that this is even going to open up new doors for, because that the projects are going to be more comprehensive than we've traditionally seen with affordable housing, where they're going to have multiple uses that could be funded. And so it may open up new doors for leverage. So, in the past, the affordable housing community has struggled to apply the federal new market tax credit program to an affordable housing project. And, that's a whole new world if we can begin to bring more of those into the state of California and leverage those against these projects. And I think there's other, sources of funding out there right now that we've really potentially left on the table because we haven't had the leveraging sources here in the state. So potentially we've got new resources to play with, we hope.
Okay, so maybe go back to the last slide, which sort of summarized the areas where you guys would like to get some feedback. And we need I'd like to open it now to council member comments. You need not focus on these outstanding issues, but I think it would be helpful to give staff some direction on these 4 issues. I think these are areas where key staff could not resolve points of view, and so there was obviously some conflict among key staff. And if council members can weigh in on these 4 outstanding issues, that would be very helpful. And yet, as I mentioned earlier, you're free to talk about anything. Matt?
Well, actually, before we weighed in on these, I'd sort of like to hear public comment, because I'd like to have my comments to the staff informed by the public comment. So I think it might be premature, at least from my viewpoint. It would be premature for you to give you direction on these things until I've heard other perspectives. I wanted to go back, and I don't want to spend a great deal of time on this because I do want to give the public a chance to comment, but I'd like to go back and sort of revisit why we divided this up into 2 buckets of the TODs and then the integrated connectivity projects. Sure. And what I really want to make sure of is that in the statutes governing our decisions here, the legislature identified that there are a number of projects eligible for funding pursuant to this program. And I want to make sure that all the projects identified by the legislature are available for funding as we've developed this program. Okay. And in particular, as I look at this, there is some reference to complete streets programs. Correct. And there is a reference to including pedestrian and bicycle facilities and supportive infrastructure. But I just want to make sure that we've captured the full range of programs that were identified as by the legislature as being available for funding.
The short answer is yes. And so this slide here reflects in our guidelines what we've identified as eligible capital and program uses. They are all they're all directly relatable to what was provided in statute. So the complete streets related infrastructure is essentially captured in transportation or transit related infrastructure. It's really what kind of infrastructure do we need to ensure walkability, bicycles, a broad access to non-motorized transportation.
But we've tied it to other forms of transit. So you have to show under both the TOD program and the integrated connectivity projects that it's tied to buses or van pools. It can't just be a complete street, or can it, just for the purposes of having a complete street?
Well, we are requiring as part of that integrated connectivity that there be at least some connection to transit. It doesn't have to directly fund transit. So there has to be more than one capital cost. You can have basically a complete streets infrastructure, so bike lane, pedestrian walkways, and other infrastructure that connects to transit, essentially. But it doesn't require the funding.
I guess the question I had was, is that connectivity required by the statute? Is the legislature?
It is not, but what it does is helps to facilitate the reduction of vehicle miles traveled and connecting to transit and ensuring that nexus is there.
Okay, well then I've got 2 messages from you, because you've just said that it is consistent with the legislation, but it's not. It's requiring more than the legislation.
Correct.
Okay. So do we have the flexibility if we wanted to do something differently? Could we do something different? Could we just have the complete streets as identified here? And identifying that we still need to have some reduction in GHG emissions, but could you have that? And if so, would that fit into either one of these 2 buckets? It doesn't sound like it does.
You could do it. We would have to restructure the definition of the integrated connectivity project. And I'm going to look back and see if there's nods.
The only thing I would add, Allison, Secretary Rodriguez, is that the work group in making this recommendation was interested in going beyond what other programs did. We felt these other programs exist, will continue to exist, enjoy ongoing funding. We felt that we had an opportunity to leverage GHG reductions by combining strategies and working across transportation modalities in order to do that. In the final analysis, that could be not a good choice, but it's the choice that we have recommended up to this point.
And I just wanted to make sure it was a deliberate choice.
It certainly was.
And wanted to relate what we were doing here to back to the statute and the discussion of what the legislature had identified in the statute. The other question I had was, how did we come up with the division of 40-30, and what was the rationale for that?
I'm going to actually defer that to HCD staff. I do have the explanation, but I'm going to. So I'm going to, because he's responding. Eugene Lee with the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Hi. Could you repeat the question? Thank you.
We were asking for the rationale behind the division of 40% for the TOD projects, or yeah, I think it's 40% for TOD projects and 30% for the integrated connectivity projects.
Right. As you see in the proposed grant amounts, the TOD projects have a higher ceiling than the ICP projects. We believed that warranted, a larger baseline percentage of 40%. Being a new program, we're uncertain really on the subscription rate on either a TOD or an ICP at this time. That's why we wanted to afford enough of a 30 percentile kind of flexibility to either bucket.
Why divide them at all? Why not just see what comes in through the door?
By nature, you'll see that they're very different between the two in design and characteristic and requirements.
I also think, Claudia Capio, HCD, to keep it simple, we had a 50% affordable housing requirement, so we weighted it, given that housing is expensive to produce and build, and we have a requirement for at least 50% of those funds to go toward housing.
The 50%, where is that in the statute? Where's the 50%? If somebody could remind me. It's in the legislation?
Yeah, do you want to, we have the.
50% affordable housing? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Secretary Rodriguez has proposed we get some public comments before council member comments. Would any council members like to speak now, or would everybody like to hold off? After Brian, I'll go.
Continuing on the line of clarifications, my impression, and Allison, you can correct us if it's wrong, was that one of the rationales for the two programs was to ensure some access for more medium-sized urban areas or rural areas with the second program. Is that the rationale?
That's correct. So if you look at the transit-oriented development category, the requirement is really related, the defining characteristic is really looking at high-quality transit. And so that is fairly limited to urban areas, largely the Bay Area and Los Angeles, Southern California. It leaves out the rest of the state in terms of that kind of frequency of transit service. What we wanted to do was come up with a more comprehensive way to address transit in other areas and the opportunity to connect them with effective infrastructure projects that would ultimately still get them to transit. So the integrated connectivity projects really do allow for that broader access by the rest of the state, we would have to say. And we actually even, in thinking about incorporating van pools and expanding the definition of transit stations or transit stops, accounted for van pool stops. Right, not your traditional transit station definition. We wanted to ensure that there was some allowance for that as well. Thanks, Brian.
Yes, and a related question. In terms of the different types of rail that are listed, I noticed one that's not included is intercity rail that would include like Amtrak service.
That's
and
right.
Was the intent that, or a determination that wasn't a high quality?
No, we actually think that it. We're excited to include intercity rail. However, it was in a last minute edit. redefined and was unintentionally excluded. So in future drafts, that will be brought back in.
Thank you.
Apologies to Intercity Rail and all those who'd worked.
Secretary Caballero.
Well, while I don't mind hearing the public comment as part of the discussion, I want to make a couple of comments real quickly about some a couple of issues. One is that at our last hearing, there were two comments that were I thought very important, and I want to make sure that we don't lose them. One of them was the roles of the MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations. They were very firm in saying that they want to be very involved in the determination as to whether the projects that are being proposed are part of their SCSs. And so I think that's one of the questions that's been posed, and I think it's important, and we need to take that into consideration. The other thing that I recall hearing is there was a concern about technical assistance for disadvantaged communities. There is a call out in this document to make sure that we're providing benefit to disadvantaged communities, and technical assistance was one of the issues that was raised. And so I think in part of our timeline we have to consider the need and the time for technical assistance. And since many of the communities that were, well, in many communities, the planning departments have been gutted. There's been very little construction, and that's really what supports planners. And so it's probably not only disadvantaged communities. It may be smaller communities that just don't have the resources because they haven't really had projects. And so I think that's going to be an issue. The other issue that came up, the geographic distribution, I think we're probably going to hear a lot of discussion about that. And I think the challenge, as you see when you see how many awards are going to be made potentially under this proposal, is that there are not going to be hundreds. It's going to be important that we can show that all parts of the state have the opportunity to participate in this kind of program. Whether it's going to be feasible or not remains to be seen, but I think we need to be cognizant that that we really want everybody to reduce greenhouse gases. It's all of our responsibility, and so we're going to have resources to be able to figure out how to do that. And as a footnote to that, I think it's probably the TOD grants that came out of HCD all went to big cities. And I think that's the reason we've been talking about for the other category. None of it went to rural communities. And yet we have a responsibility to rural communities as well, and they need to be engaged. So it may be necessary, and I put this out there, is we may need to come up with another program that can address issues for rural communities and another funding source in order to be able to get them on board and really thinking about how they conserve and how they build up, not out. There isn't the incentive that there are for some of the more urban areas. You just don't have the transportation infrastructure in place to be able to meet their needs. And so if you ignore them, then it never gets built, and then they're not participating. And so we got to figure out a way to be able to include them in that. And then one other, the last issue, and there's others that I want to hear public comment as well, is the GHG quantification. And this really goes back to the comment I made in one of the other items, which is that we really need research on this. We need good numbers. I hesitate to create a score based on the reduction that equals the funding, if I'm saying that right. John, because to get back to your issue, if the final piece, financing piece, is to come in and to have this program fix the sewer system so that the whole project works at reducing greenhouse gases, so you're doing the infrastructure in place, how do you score the GHG reduction of that particular piece separate from the whole project? And if you do the whole project, then you've got to include tax credits and grants from the feds, and it just seems to me that we're really making it complicated. And let me just say that I wanted to start off with thanking staff because I think they've done a stellar job on this project. This is not easy. The legislation is it dictates certain things. And so we're trying to make it work in a way that grants some flexibility, but also that really does reduce greenhouse gases. So this is really complicated, but I think staff has done a really good job. And I want to say that because none of this really takes away from that. We just got to get it right. So kudos to staff. They're really working hard. So.
Okay. Yes.
I think I have a clarifying question, which I'll pose. And this goes back, I hate to go back to this question. I don't want to confuse it. Does every project have to have a housing component? My understanding is the ICP projects do not.
Correct.
Could a large city with a robust transit system have an ICP project? Okay, because I'm just thinking it's very important that we don't leave commercial development out of this program because it's very important that we get jobs near transit to reduce VMT and increase transit usage, not just to get housing near transit. And so I think anything we can do to make that very clear would be really helpful, because I understand the distinction is a little bit to get the medium cities in, but it would be nice to know that some of the places with more robust transit could also be doing some of these commercial development projects, because it is very often left
So
out of
then,
the
just for
equation.
clarification, in your clarifying question.
Yes.
I heard two questions there. One was whether or not a large urban city could apply for both a TOD project and an integrated connectivity project. That's the first question. The second part was, does it have to be housing?
Well, I think the question
As
was
part of it.
So the question first was ICP does not have to include housing.
Correct.
And I just wanted to know in terms of who can apply for each. There's not a restriction. So if you are a large city with a robust transit system, you could opt, instead of doing a TOD project, to do an ICP project.
That is what it's not clear. Let's just put it that way, and we shall make it clearer.
So the TOD is only eligible within a half-mile radius of that high-frequency, 15-minute headway transit service. So you can have, a big metropolitan area that has a development location that does not qualify for TOD because you have to have that high-quality transit. So you can have an ICP in a metropolitan area, and that's that really is the idea of that type of development, is that it be very inclusive, to recognize that that we have suburban development, we have small city development that doesn't have high quality transit, we have rural areas, and so it's inclusive of all those things that don't meet the traditional definition of TOD. The other thing I just wanted to mention, the reason that we really emphasize the affordable housing in the TOD category is because we know through lots of research that as soon as you cite that type of transit, the cycle of displacement and gentrification starts at that moment. So as soon as you cite a transit station that's going to have that type of frequency, we know at that moment that the value of that land starts to go up, the property values go up. And so the idea is that we want to integrate displacement policies in that development to ensure that the households that are living there now benefit from the improvements that are being made and aren't driven out and gentrified. And that goes equally as much for the businesses. And you'll see that in the displacement strategy in the in one of the scored criteria is that we're also looking at business displacement. That's really important too. We don't want to drive out mom and pop businesses, and we want to ensure that that they're taken care of as well through that policy.
And Susan, let me, while we're working through this. So this is the other Claudia.
I think we've moved to the public comment period.
So Susan, let's just hypothetically say if you were a large city with high-performing transit, you had a TOD application, could you apply for an ICP in addition?
So at this point, I believe in our the draft guidelines, we are limiting an awarded application to one per jurisdiction. And so you can certainly apply for. Okay. You can have both. It's limited to 15 mil, I've been told. So obviously, this is, this is all.
Okay. If I might suggest to my esteemed colleagues that this has been a great demonstration of the kind of interactivity that's gone on for 35 days straight, and it's been terrific. And we really we've learned a lot from each other, and we continue to learn a lot, and we'll continue to work hard together on getting it right, as you say, Secretary Caballero. I think probably, unless there are more council comments, you would like to hear from.
I've been trying to get recognized since the
That's
beginning.
right.
I have a comment whenever I can do it. In two things. One is and it's painful, but I feel like I should be direct about it. And that's on the metropolitan planning organizations. There was a real attempt at the legislature to get specificity in terms of a carve-out and a role, and it didn't succeed. And so I'm not really thrilled about the fact that it would be relitigated here. And I think that's an important comment to make before there's 20 people that relitigate it, rather than after. And I think it is very helpful, because I think Secretary Caballero's comment was very helpful. It's if there's an existing plan that needs to be integrated so that it's really appropriate, we need to figure that out. And if there are ways that in doing their job they do it, we want that. But the water bond, in a very similar way, ended most of the traditional carve-outs and said everybody will compete on merit against the goals in each pot, rather than sort of sending it in certain places. And I think it was done in that spirit. So, I recognize the legislature did that. I recognize there was a debate, and I recognize they determined the outcome. So I just don't want to relitigate that here. And it would be helpful if the testimony is geared toward how can we use what they do, and how, when they recognize merit in their areas, can we make sure we recognize the same merit. The other thing is on the geographic distribution. I have sat on many different state boards, and the one that comes immediately to mind is the Integrated Waste Management Board, that had specific requirements about geographic distribution that were a nightmare. A nightmare. In that one, there was just a line, and a certain absolute percentage below that line had to be granted, and a certain percentage above it. And it was never workable. You could never figure it out. You always had applications that weren't 100% in the right place, and no matter what you did, you couldn't necessarily get applications in the other place. So if somebody stands up and asks for geographic equity, I'm really looking for not just that blanket statement, how they might suggest is a workable way or a fair way to actually achieve it. Because I think we need the equity, but we need some flexibility, and it's a question of how we mix those. So I just wanted to make